Hello and welcome back to the Star Family Wisdom Podcast. I'm Jenna, your host, the founder of Star Family Wisdom, and I'm also a former global vice president for Whole Foods Market. And it's been a profound spiritual and transformation journey that led me to this place, having these sorts of conversations with you and incredible guests. Star Family Wisdom is a paradigm shifting podcast community and modern day mystery school for your spiritual and cosmic evolution. We're here to help you get initiated into the mysteries of the universe, help you transform, help you heal, help you come back into your connection with yourself, with your star family, your guides, and experience our multidimensional reality in a new way. And today's episode is a special one. We continue to just encounter so many new soul family connections here on Earth. So it's like our star family is helping me get connected to and meet all of the right people at just the right time. And Jehan Sattaur is our guest today. Jehan is also someone who has experienced profound past life recall, the recall of past lives that are connected to Star Family off Earth. And part of Jehan's mission is being a cognitive behavioral therapist, a hypnotherapist, a nutrition coach, a mindfulness teacher and expert, and he focuses specifically on subconscious self-sabotage. So Jehan has studied the mind in depth, and this is a topic I'm passionate about because it's been a big part of my transformation experience, learning how the subconscious mind works, understanding our programming, understanding what is driving our experience of reality. So Jehan assists people in all walks of life in how to be fully mindful and allow negative automatic thoughts about the events of our external reality and the programs that we take on to reveal themselves so that new patterns can be established and people can learn to operate from a place of peace and purpose and passion. And a lot of Jehan's work focuses on removing those disempowering thoughts and beliefs and helps you get, better emotional control and helps you experience, better emotional circumstances as you do that. And Jehan really focuses with clients on how to get them over that hurdle of going from disempowering beliefs to an empowered state of being. As he said in the conversation, he wants people to, leave his office, his virtual office, as quickly as possible. He wants people to be empowered. And so this conversation is all about that. And Jehan has a special skill for language and really tuning in to our language patterns and how that reveals where our blocks, our trauma, our negative programming might be stemming from. So check out Jehan Sattaur at jehansattaur.com. We've got his links below, and you can also check him out on the Boundless Authenticity podcast, where you get your podcast apps, or on YouTube. And you can check out my recent episode with him on his podcast. And that was a fun episode where I was having a bad day. Like, I was going through some transformation on that day. And instead of self-sabotaging, which I almost did, instead of canceling on Jehan, I decided I need to just be authentic and show what's going on and talk about it. So we did that. And then in today's episode, we go really deep on all aspects of the subconscious mind and again, how we transform and get our minds and our neural networks into a different place. So enjoy this episode with Jehan, and I'll see you on the other side. Hi, Jehan. Welcome. It's so good to have you.
Thanks for having me on with you, Jenna.
Oh, it's so good to have you on the show. We have so much to talk about, and we want to talk kind of broadly about your work in self-sabotage, your work in mindfulness, your work in meditation and mindset coaching, but you also have some really interesting star family connections that we want to talk about as well. So I think this is going to be a really cool, well-rounded conversation for our audience. It's important to me that when we're getting really cosmic and out there with our journeys and exploration, that we're also keeping it grounded. So I really appreciate that you bring that approach. So before we get into all the things, I want to just open it up to hear a little bit about how you got to this point. How did you even get to being a mindset and self-sabotage expert, cognitive behavioral therapist, specialist? How did you even get into this sort of work? What led you here?
How much time do you have? So I was a professional musician for so many years of my life. I started young. I started at 14 playing my first shows on stage, and I got catapulted into the world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll at a very early age. I'm talking 16, 17. So I started drinking and smoking pot, and that led to harder drugs and things like that. And I'd had a lot of stuff going on at home, especially coming from my dad and my sister and stuff, who were very verbally abusive and manipulative and things like that. So I didn't know how to deal with any of that. And back then, if you said that someone was doing a particular set of things to you at home, you'd get gaslit by your friends and family. They'd be like, "Oh no, not him." So I didn't know what to do with any of that, and I guess I got stuck in a mind trap. Music took me a lot of different places, and I was in such a low vibration that I didn't know that good things were actually happening all around me in terms of my career and stuff. So fortunately, after having a few really bad experiences trying to overdose, just listening to the voices in my head, which I actually think were entity attachments and stuff. Well, I shouldn't say think. I know they were.
That makes sense.
Um,
That when we're in that really low vibrational state, like that's when they attach. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. So after dealing with a lot of different things that led me down the road of trying to take my own life a few times,
Mm,
I finally felt an actual shift because I don't want to cuss on your show, but I actually was like, wow, I can't even kill myself, right?
mm,
And the instant I heard myself say that sentence out loud, something changed.
mm,
It's hard to really describe what that feeling was, but it was like a full body sensation that just went, a light was on. So I started getting interested in um how can I better myself? And those kinds of entity attachments, those lower states, you tend to reject anything that's positive.
yeah.
But because what I said out loud came with such a profound feeling, opportunities that were completely opposite to what I'd known before started coming to me. So
Mm,
books started showing up. And one was a book by Sylvia Brown, the psychic. And then it was other things like Robert Greene books and things like that. And I was so eager to learn that that just kind of took me on a journey of bettering myself. And I traveled to Nashville, Tennessee to learn all about the music industry and be a part of that. And things changed for me there because I got exposed to the new age spirituality at first. And then that changed my life because I started really meditating then. And fast forward a couple of years to being at a gig somewhere, and this really tall guy walks up to me, and I'm talking to the sound engineer, and I'm telling the guy, plug this in over here. This guy's got to be over here. The drummer should be doing this, all these different things. It's probably bossing the guy around, right? And this really tall blonde haired guy with blue eyes taps me on the shoulder. And I mean, to somebody looking at it, it must have been hilarious because I was kind of like, what? Like he was that tall. I'm a short guy, anyways. So he says, I notice you have a tremendous affinity for leadership. Have you ever heard of coaching? And I was like, no, hold on a second. I finished barking orders at the sound guy. I turned back to the guy to say, hey, tell me more about what you were saying. And he was gone. I searched the entire bar for this guy. He was gone. And I thought to myself, well, why would he just disappear like that? Who the hell says, have you ever heard of coaching and then you dip? Like what?
Right. That's weird. That's a real weirdo thing to do.
It's a very strange thing. So I went home immediately. I just typed it in, and then stuff like personal trainers came up, and I saw Tony Robbins. I was like, hey, I know that guy. So that's how I got involved in the
Wow.
coaching aspect, and all of the wisdom that comes along with that changed me for the better because it got me curious. It got me aware of a different world that was out there than what I'd known before. And it resonated on such a high level that I just haven't looked back since then. And that was 10 years ago.
Wow. Wow. What a beautiful transformation and divine intervention, it sounds like. Do you associate those moments back then of being able to start down this new path and have that strength, that willpower to do that, and that man showing up? Like, do you associate that with divine intervention?
I'll tell you what, there's a few things that I didn't say, and it was on purpose because I was hoping you would ask me. The first time that I tried to commit suicide, nothing happened. I came back. I was really sick for like 2 weeks, and then I got back on my feet. But then I went back down that dark path again. But I knew something wasn't quite right with the way that I felt that first time. So something changed then. The second time I tried it, it was because I still couldn't see a way out of anything. And it was clear to me by then that nobody around me was interested in helping me with my problems, which made it harder. And my dog woke me up. He's gone now. He passed around this time last year, but he was one of my guardians. He was sent here to protect me. I found that out later.
Hmm.
Um, so he jumps on the bed and he puts his paws on my face. He starts scratching my face, and I could actually feel myself slipping away.
Oh, wow.
I feel my legs getting numb and everything. And he started whimpering and scratching, and it started to hurt so bad that it jarred me from that state. So I came back with him looking at me and licking my face and all kinds of stuff like that. And I
Hmm.
rolled off the side of the bed, and I was sick for another few weeks or so again. And then again, things seemed different, but I just couldn't quite put my finger on what that was. So each time, the very last time, the third time after that was a couple of months after that, still couldn't see a way out, still couldn't figure out what was different, what to do next, where to go. Wasn't getting any help. Friends weren't talking to me anymore. They thought I was kind of crazy, to be honest. And all I had were these books and my guitar, basically. It's my only friend.
Hmm.
And I was out actually, and I overdosed. And I went into this dark, murky space. And so all the cool kids are calling that a near-death experience, right?
Hmm.
I didn't see any fancy lights or anything like that. It was just a dark, brown, murky space. And I could tell that there were like what I now know are some kinds of beings were around me. I could see them in the corners of my vision and stuff like that. And there was a frequency noise. I can't describe it, but that's all I heard. All I know is that I was out for maybe 45 minutes or longer.
Oh, wow.
And I came back in and I felt that feeling of being sucked right back into the top of my head. And this time I wasn't sick. Nothing happened. I just went about my day as normal. I slept really long that night. I was tired for like the next week, but I didn't feel unwell or anything like that. It's like something completely changed.
Mm.
And I paid attention to that. But I still said what I said. I still said, I can't even kill myself, right? What's going on?
Right.
And that kind of was the key that unlocked the door, because the instant I said that, within 3 days, actually, we were saying that number three,
Yep.
within 3 days, books started showing up. People were like, hey, you should read this book. And Aaron Beck's book, Prisoners of Hate. Aaron Beck is one of the founding fathers of cognitive behavioral therapy. So I like to say CBT saved my life,
Mm.
actually. And it was just the ideas in that book led to me getting fit, led to me quitting all my other musical projects. And it turns out that stuff was holding me back, because as soon as I cut ties with that, then the next thing you know, I was into manifesting territory.
Yep.
Um, I started, well, I should say, I was working out and I'd run on the treadmill and I'd think of all the things that I wanted to do. When you're running like that, you're in the 0 point, because you're not thinking of anything else except
Yeah.
for what you put your focus on, right?
And you're
So I just
generating a lot of energy too at the same time.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So at the highest points of, I guess, running and stuff, I'd feel the surge of what I thought was adrenaline going through my body, but I didn't know that I was manifesting a whole new reality,
Mhm.
right? And drawing that towards me. And so that was when a lady showed up out of nowhere and she's like, hey, I love your music. Is there anything I can do to help you? I was like, yeah, get me out of here. She was like, well, I can't do that, but I own a gym and my friend is this person, IFBB pro bodybuilder, and she sends me workout plans, like a couple $100 worth of supplements and stuff. She trained me for free.
Oh,
She'd
wow.
call me up and tell me everything I needed to do. Then after that, another lady showed up. She's like, hey, I'm from a radio station over here, and do you have a manager? Can I help you with anything? I was like, yeah, you can help me with everything. And so that's how I got my opportunity to get out of here and go to Nashville. And so it just kind of threw me on what I think it was a redirection of some divine intervention that threw me on this journey on purpose,
Yeah.
including a tall, blonde hair, blue eyed guy tapping me on the shoulder saying, hey, have you ever heard of coaching? You know?
It's all so incredible, these moments that emerge from that darkness. And I just want to honor you and your experiences and your journey for a moment, and just applaud you, for the strength you had to go down that path of exploration and wellness. And look at you now. I mean, you're such an example of what's possible. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to share with the world. So I just so appreciate your vulnerability and authenticity. Speaking of your podcast, Boundless Authenticity, thank you. I think it's so important to have these conversations, and that moment of questioning. It's like that moment of, maybe not even asking for help necessarily, but even just questioning reality, like just questioning, like, what's going on here? It's like that can be that trigger for, the beings, the team, that is, part of us to swoop in and start to help in some way, to help break
Sure.
through the illusion.
Yeah. Thank you for seeing me, first of all. But, that's the dualistic nature of things. The darkness always imposes itself on you, but
Yeah.
the light is waiting on you to ask for help, or waiting
Yeah.
on you to demonstrate a willingness to change. That's
Yep.
why I love to tell everybody, until your desire to change is greater than your desire to stay the same, nothing's going to break through for you. And something as simple as a thought like, there has to be something more than this, can as well be dualistic. It can keep you in darkness or it can lead you to the light.
Yeah.
And I experienced both ends of the spectrum with that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. The being, the man, whoever that was who showed up, that we hear lots of stories about, people in these moments of crossroads or, major life events or danger, some person showing up out of the blue in a split moment with some helpful comment, some helpful, physical action, whatever it is, and then poof, they're gone. Like there are so many stories like that. I just want to pause on that for a moment for the audience, because I think that, to me, I had chills the whole time you were talking, and I'm tuned in enough now to feel truth, to feel, what's under the surface, and it feels to me like
Divine intervention.
that was divine intervention. Like that was an angel, that was a being from somewhere else who took physical form for a moment to support you.
Yeah. That was a nudge. I mean, I jokingly say all the time, like nobody's talking to me. Like guides and stuff don't talk to me the way that they talk to other people. But the reason for that is because that's not my dominant sensibility.
Yeah,
So I'm not, I'm probably just not listening. They move stuff around in the physical environment
yeah,
for me, or they bring people to me,
yeah,
and I am smart enough to know to pay attention.
yeah.
Like not everybody's got guides and stuff. They're like, "Hey, dude, you're doing this."
Right.
Not everybody has that luxury. Some
Yeah,
people have, they have to interact with the physical world a little bit more and look for those synchronicities and
yeah.
work with them.
Yeah, but such a
So
good
I think,
example of how they're all around, when we are
yep.
just open to receiving them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's so true. They're always all around.
yeah. I
Yeah.
want I want to talk a little bit about cognitive behavioral therapy, and how that, helped you in this shift, because I haven't even really talked about it with our audience, or with you. I think that was a really critical part of me coming out of my darkness when I first started waking up spiritually, and started gaining this awareness of how destructive my mindset was for myself, and just how negative, and how I would go down these really negative spirals really easily. And so I want to highlight that for a moment, and have you just explain, what is it, and how do you now, or how did you use it then to help yourself, kind of over this hurdle, and then how do you use it now with clients?
Oh, first of all, let me hit you with some quotes.
We love a good
You
quote.
Ernest Hemingway said, "You can't get away from yourself by moving from one geographical place to another." That was a lesson that I learned.
Mm.
Everywhere I went, there I was. So I kind of um I kind of took the Aaron Beck book as a point of awareness for myself. And when I say that, I mean it made me aware the extent of other people's darkness.
Mm.
And not very many people can honestly look at their lives and be like, "Oh, well, my life's not as bad as that," and then begin to change because of that. A lot of people want to stay with the ego and say, "Oh, well, they don't know what they're talking about," and continue to validate that. And that's kind of what got me started and got me looking with new eyes, as Marcel Proust would say. And then I began getting very interested in what actually is cognitive behavioral therapy. What are the processes involved? So I started reading things like there's a book called CBT for anxiety and things like that. I was an anxious person as well.
Me too, big time.
Um, yeah, and as you know, anxiety and depression tend to hang out together.
Yep, I had
You know,
that
when
too.
when one goes away, the other shows up and says, "Hey, I heard you were lonely." And I had to work my way through that. And I realized that what I learned in those textbooks, it was so clinical that it just didn't have any real substance to it at all, actually. So I decided that I was going to go take a course in it, take a class in it. And once I realized how it worked, I was like, this is brilliant. Everything is going to be good from now on because now I've got the tool that I need. And I simplified it for myself. It's A plus B equals C. A is the activating event or the trigger. B is your belief, and C is the emotional consequence.
Mm.
So A plus B equals C. And the consequence is as a result of what you believe about the event. And once I started walking around all day long, every day, asking myself the same question, okay, what is it I believe about this? And actually listen to the chatter in my head and saying, okay, well, I'm going to ask you some more questions.
Mm-hmm.
Things opened up for me. And the meditation is what helped with that as well, because through the meditation, I could take things down a notch
Right.
and get some clarity to actually hear my true spiritual self,
Right.
which is the thing that appears to be under attack 24/7 from everything in the external world, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like our world is heavily designed to support the ego flourishing and to support us going down those darker paths of thought. I think that the whole idea of like challenging yourself is really cool. Like once you kind of gained that awareness and you're like, wait a second, hold on here, hold on here. Let me ask myself some questions about these
Mm-hmm.
beliefs. I had a similar experience where I almost got mad. Like once I once I found some of this information, I was like, "Whoa, why am I like how did I get this way? Like why am I, believing all these negative things when actually there's a flip side. There's, the positive possibilities, and all of the positive what ifs, I could be thinking about it. It kind of fired me up. Like, did you feel that way too? Were you like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this now that I've got the keys.
Yeah, it made me pick up the shovel and start digging,
Yep.
really. And if you dig long enough, you'll find some beliefs.
Right.
And they are shocking. It's shocking what lies under the surface, just waiting for you to address, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I did. And I used that anger. In fact, I tell my clients, you got to get to a point where you feel anger.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the Hawkins scale of consciousness, anger is right before the willingness,
That's the
right?
breakthrough, right?
Yep. And
Yeah.
then it goes up to neutrality, and then it goes all the way up to the good stuff like
Yeah.
love and enlightenment and
Yeah.
things like that, right?
Yeah.
So you even in the psychological model, the change curve by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross,
Mhm.
anger is a necessary step
Yeah.
to moving towards, the things that you want.
Yeah.
So it did become new fire to propel me, and I never gave up on myself. That's the key. You can't expect anybody else in this world to really invest that much interest in you, because unfortunately the average person is only interested in one thing, and that's themselves.
Yeah.
Everybody's got a full plate. The
Yeah.
sooner we understand that and not take it as a personal attack and realize we've got to do it, we've got to do the thing, it gets a little bit easier, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that self-responsibility piece,
Mm-hmm.
it's like we
Yep.
we we, we all want to be there for each other, but also we're responsible and should be able to pick up the mantle and do the work. That's what we've got to do because ultimately no one's going to do it for us. Someone might provide us the tools and help and books and hold space for us, but
Right.
but then we go home to ourselves. And
Right. And we
so
have to arrive at insight,
yeah.
and the insight builds upon insight until we reach wisdom, but we get
Mhm.
the wisdom from applying the insight, right? we,
Right,
we
right,
have to do it on our own. and
right.
and you can listen to the best podcast, you can read the best book, and you can have the best gurus or best psychologists or whatever, but when you are by yourself, are you actually following through with your word? Are you staying in integrity with yourself? Are you keeping yourself in check? That's how we get to wellness. That's how we get to spiritual insight. That's how we access the levels. And everything on the outside, like I already said, is designed to keep us under a thumb on purpose. That's the point of Earth School,
Right, right.
right? It's
Well,
kids, can you spy the lie? You know?
well, it's like the ego's also designed to keep us in this experience of separation too. And because of where we're at in our evolution on Earth, it kind of seems like because we're at this point where these sorts of breakthroughs are so much more possible for us now, where we're able to gain awareness about the programming we've taken on and the negativity of our culture and all of that. It's almost like our egos individually and collectively are just fighting that. They're like, no, like, no, don't see the truth, don't see the truth, don't go there. And
Right.
so there's also this, like, when you're kind of at that point of breakthrough for some people, I recognize there's also this like pull from the ego to come up with every excuse it will come up with to not allow you to do your practices or follow through on your new beliefs, whatever that is. How do you help people through that? Because there is that very real, like, beginning stage of implementing new practices, changing your beliefs, shifting your programming, that does require that follow through, that practice. And when the ego starts acting up and acting like a child and not wanting to follow through with you, like, how do you help your clients through that stage of transformation?
You nailed it. It's a tug of war. It really is. And besides the CBT thing, I really got involved in hypnotherapy because when you study life coaching and stuff, they tell you, yeah, the subconscious mind's doing 95% of the stuff for you. They show you the iceberg model, but then they get away from it very quickly.
Yeah.
And they never say, okay, well, what is in that 95% though?
Right. And how do you
Right?
change it?
Exactly. And so self-sabotage is that thing that we do subconsciously for the majority of our lives until we become aware of the fact that we can self-sabotage our best attempts. And that's where people get stuck.
Yeah.
Because when they get to the point where they know, okay, I am the only person here that's messing up my whole life, how do I change that? They panic because they don't know how to do anything about that.
Yeah. That's a
And when you're
scary,
in a,
scary place to be. Like
I was
that,
just about to say
like
that.
that is like this really uncomfortable moment to be in. I've had a lot of those moments.
Yeah, you got to get really good at knowing when you're about to self-sabotage.
Yeah.
And what happens with clients is they just don't know how to do the things that they don't know how to do. They don't realize that um, we're all in different states of hypnosis all day long. That's what makes the Earth School thing such a terrible thing at first because until you know for a certainty that you're hypnotized all the time and that even if that's just a function of the brain needing to go into alpha brainwave for 7 hours every day to process all the information. I like to say that the conscious mind is just there to keep us from bumping into stuff. And that's just about all there is to it, like it's really, I don't want to say that it's useless, but it really does have like a very low usability features. It's kind of like a number 14 spanner or something. You can only turn nuts that size. You can only turn bolt that size, right?
Well, and this is
So
like the paradox of it too, because it's like we think we're conscious, right? We think we are running the show, but it's kind of like our brain's actually a computer, and it's just running a program. Our body is just running a program.
exactly. And it's just one program after the next all day long. So what happens to people is that their level of safety is determined by the external world, and they aren't yet rooted inside of themselves. So as I love to say, the human body is the technology. All this stuff that we have, like that's not technology. That's nothing compared to what the human body can do, right? And it never will reach that point.
Yeah.
Um, so it's just something that we have that is a vehicle for the expression of our consciousness.
Yeah.
And we're told from the time we are born that we don't have any power.
Yeah.
You can't do all those things that you think you can do. And when we're 5, 6 years old, we're having all of these experiences and interacting with, the home vibration, the frequencies, that those realities. And our parents tell us that we're crazy, essentially. So that's the kind of reality that we're brought up in, and it's our responsibility throughout our lives to kind of note that and
Yeah.
say, wait a minute, this keeps happening. But unfortunately, we get programmed with things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not safe somehow, I don't understand what it feels like to be loved and supported by the creator.
Yeah.
um we get programmed with resentment, rejection. um we just continue to bump our heads against the threshold of joy and success
Yeah.
every chance we get, and we don't know it's coming from all the things that happened, not just in 0 to 6 years old, lives before that,
Right.
right?
And ancestral trauma, because it's like whatever programming has existed on earth for all of our ancestors and this, few thousand years of patriarchy that has existed, like we're taking on all of that too. So it's like we're
Mm-hmm.
we're digging out of something big here. And I think that's also important to acknowledge for people because this is big work. It's not as easy as just awakening spiritually and poof, you're healed. You're living this life of love, joy, and prosperity. We're having to dig out of multi-generational thousands of years of distorted programming, a distorted reality, essentially.
That's absolutely correct. You were just talking about what I like to call the history level. That's all the past lives or genetic memory that's in
Yeah.
the collective consciousness.
Yeah.
And I love to use the example of the past 3 years we just went through. A lot of people reacted to that situation really badly because they remember other times.
Mm.
It's in our DNA
It's
to have
triggering. Yeah.
yeah. And they don't realize, they think that their responses were perfectly rational and perfectly normal, but really it's just a replaying of stuff that they experienced before. So we have that stuff that happens all the time. We do crazy stuff in our lives because in a past life we did it too, and it got us results then.
Yeah.
So we can't just, I guess where I'm going with this is, we can't just shove everything into the childhood trauma box.
Right. Yeah, it's so multi-layered. There's a lot going on here. And so you use hypnotherapy to help people. I'm a huge fan of hypnotherapy. I've employed it as well. Like you, it's like once I figured out, oh my gosh, like I have a really big hole to dig out of here. I have a lot of neural networking to change in my brain. It's like I need all the tools. So
Yep.
how do you use it, and how do you use it personally, and how do you use it with clients?
Well, I think the job as a therapist or a coach or anything like that, your responsibility is to help the people who are like you, because you know that situation best.
Yeah.
And you can kind of say, okay, here's my hand. I've been that way before. You got to go this way to get out of it, right? So I don't give anybody anything to do that I haven't done myself and that I don't know if it works or not, right? So my whole mindset is realizing human beings at the highest level of evolution all sleepwalk. Nobody's isolated from that. We're all sleepwalking. We're all in trance. So you have to hack the subconscious mind in the same way that it experiences reality every single day in a state of trance, right? So sometimes meditation can be a good tool. Sometimes muscle testing can be a good tool to diagnose beliefs. Sometimes just talk therapy can be a good tool. But I encourage people most of all to learn how to meditate, learn how to be consciously aware using their breath, using the body, because the subconscious mind is inside of the body, as we know, and um, learn how to question your negative automatic thoughts that we just have, which is just this egoic commentary all day long about this thing and that thing. And what that does is it forces you to figure out what your spiritual self is, who that is at the core, what you value, what are your ways of relating to the world? How do I learn? Am I an auditory based person? Am I a visual based person? Do I mostly feel things? Um, what is my what is my flavor of judgment? Because everybody has their own little way of judging things. They
Yeah.
judge themselves the same way they judge everything else in the outside world. Once you get used to that, you can tell the difference between a lie and the truth very easily. So you just want to learn how to question your reality and become a critical thinker and blend that with the ability to induce yourself into a trance on your own. Because my goal is to get people away from me as quickly as possible. Like, yeah, I don't want to see somebody coming back to me for a whole year, you know?
Yeah, you don't want them on training wheels that long.
No, I just kind of want to push them off the plank. You know, it's like clip your nose and I'm gonna push you.
Tough love from Jehan.
Yeah. You kind of have to do all of it yourself anyway. No amount of babying is gonna help. I'm not
Yeah.
into the coddle culture because it's kind of like reinstalling the same programs over again after you do some work on it. You can only
Yeah.
talk about something for so long before it gets old and stagnant, and now you're into a lower frequency and you feel worse than you did before, right?
And that just
So,
maintains like a victim kind of mindset when we spin on the things that are the problem and the excuses and all of that. And
yep,
yeah, and
spinning top in mud.
yeah, and it's like we want to get out of the victim mindset. We want to get into an empowered place where
Mhm.
we feel empowered to change.
Yeah. So usually, if I'm being completely honest and frank about it, I just figure out what the programs are the person's running, and then I say, okay, let's go into a trance-like state. And I was telling you about it before we started the interview. You just close your eyes, you look up, you look right around here, and you begin to look up through the levels. And I have the person take their consciousness out of the body through a series of lights and into a space that feels like a spider's web almost. And that disengages the rational mind. It gets the body, which is the technology, involved in the process in a way that it understands that something is happening. It teaches the person to feel the frequencies and the different vibrations that go along with the different levels of awareness,
Yeah.
etc. It reconnects them to their spiritual self because when you come out of that space, you want to go into a bright white light that you realize once you get there, it's home, it's a part of you, you are that light, and it's a very comfortable space to be in. And so then we just go through whatever it is before that we came up with in our the talk section of the session, whatever the program is, we change that to the opposite. And so the language of the subconscious mind is very simple, but it's also very strange to figure out on your own because when people are jumping around in front of a mirror doing affirmations and stuff, that's not always the right way to go about changing it. They think that you can just repeat something a million times, but if you say I am enough and the program is I am enough, no, the subconscious mind is going to be like, nope, that's not what's in here.
Exactly.
It's
And if there's like an underlying belief that is really driving, whatever's going on with
right.
someone, like you might be using affirmations that aren't even like connected to that
Fitting it.
belief. Yeah.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like a belief is like a table with four legs, honestly. And you have to knock down, you have to take each leg off to get to the root belief. So you could be saying, I am enough. And that's not even really the full issue.
Right.
It's connected to all those other things, like he said. And it could be, I'm not enough because I don't understand what it feels like to experience this emotional
Right.
situation. And so that's another part of the language of the subconscious. I don't understand what it feels like. The
Yeah.
understanding of what it feels like is critical to the equation, but you also can't mimic that by feeling as much emotion as you can and anchoring it like they tell you all the time. That's not a like a plaster for every sore. These techniques have a time and a place, and so you really have to figure out what language is being used because I like to say all of life we experience through a linguistic prison.
Mhm.
We lock ourselves in one little prison or another. It's I am not this or I am that. And we have to figure out, well, what is it I really believe about this? What are the thoughts that are going along with these beliefs? Because even after you pull the I am enough no and you change it to I am enough yes, then you're going to experience for like a week or two all of these different thoughts, and you're going to realize that your judgments on things change, your the way that you reflect on yourself changes, and you have to do stuff with that too.
Yes.
So I have to take my clients through that process to really sit with them and be able to understand what is happening now, because if you don't, they'll self-sabotage again,
Yeah.
like they'll go back to doing things or hanging out with people who kind of reinstall those
Right.
things.
Right. It's like you have to, yeah, it's like you
Yeah.
have to examine your whole lifestyle in a way,
Hmm.
because pretty
Yeah.
much everything we were carrying in terms of those beliefs came from the life we were living. So if we're really wanting to be serious about this level of transformation, that then has this kind of like ripple, like domino effect almost, in terms of weeding out, parts of your life that aren't supportive for these new
Yeah.
beliefs. And that's a hard process. Like how did that go for you personally as you got into this kind of later stage of transformation where you really were taking on this new life? A lot changes. How did you navigate
Yeah.
that for yourself?
Well, first of all, I see what you did there. Transformation. That was good. That was nice.
Little pun, trance.
you know, yeah. I realized that it was going to be kind of like what I just said. It was going to be this ongoing journey forever of being willing to be with my breath and really trust the breath, because that's the thing that slows down the thoughts. That's the thing that keeps the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain, in check. That I can then combine my rational thinking mind with my emotional mind and try to meet myself somewhere in the middle, which is where all the wisdom about the situation is at. And it became a constant journey of knowing when I was having a reaction to
Hmm.
something and judging something, or feeling the wrong emotion when I should really be trying to reframe something and look at it from a different way. You
Right.
know,
Right.
that's the easiest way for me to explain it in a short way.
What about relationships in your life? Because I know that's probably one of the hardest things for us when we're on this path of transformation. It requires relationship changes sometimes, or changes in how we're relating to the, people we love.
Mhm.
What was that like for you? Did you have any hard conversations, as a result of this? Did you have to change friend groups? Like what was that like?
It was terrible. It was terrible. I had to give up all my friends.
Yeah.
And, you know, the biggest piece of insight I can say there is that people come into your life, people leave your life.
Yeah.
Everything has an expiration date, whether you want to admit that or not. And if, let's say, someone is a particular way and you don't agree with it, and it's towards you have to sit that person down and you have to say to them the hard stuff. You have to say, hey, listen, when you do or say this thing, I feel this way. Don't say it makes me feel. Take responsibility for it, because your emotions are generated inside of you.
Yeah.
When you say it makes me feel, really what you're saying is that you're making yourself a victim over somebody else's actions.
Mhm.
And that's not healthy for your thought process. Say to them, this thing that you do, I react automatically by this. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
A lot of people don't want to have that conversation. A lot of people are like, you're the problem. I don't do that.
Yeah.
And then that's how you know where you stand with somebody.
Yeah.
You can only be like, okay. And then you go off on your own. You're like, okay, so this person does this thing. They don't see that they do that thing. I can't make them see that.
Right.
What do I do that provokes that response from them, adds to the energy of that situation, creates that situation? And with my thinking, where do I mentally consent to that? And you work on yourself that way,
Right.
because it's kind of like that old adage, right? When you judge somebody, when you point the finger, you got three fingers pointed back at you, right?
Exactly.
So it
Exactly.
doesn't matter what the other person does.
Right.
Some people are never going to change. You can do the greatest, I don't know, shamanic techniques. You can do the reversing techniques, all that kinds of stuff. You can forgive them till you're blue in the face. They're never going to change,
Right.
because that is their frequency, right?
Right. So
That
it's
is
on
what
you
they
to
create.
make a change. So then you have to decide, how are you going to deal with this?
Exactly.
You stay or do you go? Like that, sometimes that's it. I know when I was in this phase of really realizing I had major mindset shifts that needed to happen and I started doing the work. Well, then all of a sudden I started really recognizing that a lot of my connections with people at the time were centering around happy hours and drinking and discussion that was more or less negative, right? Like just griping and, being victims about stuff
Yeah.
as people do. Like we tend to connect over our trauma and over those sorts of things. And so all of a sudden I recognized, wow, I think for me to be healthy and to be able to successfully make this change, I can't do happy hours like I've been doing. I think I have to cut that out of my life, at least for a while, until I can, really get myself in a solidly reprogrammed, healthier place. And that's hard. It's hard saying
Yeah.
goodbye or letting go. But like you said, it's this process we go through in all aspects of our life that is natural and okay, but not something we're really taught either, which makes it harder.
Yeah. And you know what? We are programmed to believe that the people that are in our lives should be in our lives forever, and that
Right.
things aren't ever going to change. And that actually compounds our beliefs about the way life should be.
Right.
Someone can leave your life or they can stay in your life, but it doesn't mean anything about that person or about you. It just means that you have a mission and they don't fit into that. It
Right.
doesn't have to be this unloving thing. And I'm very vocal about this. We see a lot of that in meme culture, the so-called personal development culture, that tells us as soon as someone isn't who you think they should be for you, you got to cut them off, right?
Right.
Difficult people exist.
Yeah.
That's just a hard reality. And
Yeah.
it's not for you to say how they should be. They can only be who they are based on what they're programmed with, what their experiences are, and what their level of insight is. I have people in my life that are terrible to be around, but it doesn't bother me anymore, because that's just their thing. That's what they're here to do. They have to
Yeah.
learn those lessons and they have to be willing to change and be better. But you can't want more for someone than what they want for themselves. That's what I'm
Mm.
saying, you know?
Mm. Yeah, that's beautiful advice. 'Cause we
Yeah.
impose our will, our expectations on people a
Right.
lot.
That imposition of
Yeah.
expectation is not love at all.
Yeah.
It isn't, and we're entering a stranger time in humanity where there's a lot more stuff that we're not gonna like, but we have to accept it so that we don't lose our sanity, so
And
that
have
we don't.
compassion,
Yeah.
right? Like if we're spiritual people and are wanting to live a healthier, more loving life, compassion is part of that. Doesn't
Right.
mean we're condoning or getting
Right.
involved in the mix, of victimhood or whatever it is,
Right.
but we can still hold space for that and be compassionate and loving towards those people.
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be so many times where you're just like, what? And then, like, it's not for you to understand. If you don't understand it and you can't find a point of compassion, stop
Yeah,
worrying about it. It's not
right,
yours
right,
to carry. It's not yours to own. We're
right,
gonna see a lot of situations that are like that coming up, for the next few years or so, where our ability to empathize is
Yeah.
going to be tested.
Yeah.
But sometimes empathy sounds a whole lot like, I just don't understand, dude. I just don't understand what you're saying or doing. I just, and it's probably just not for me. I'm past that. And
Yeah.
you have to do your own thing. Let me know how it goes because I have no idea what it feels like to be in your shoes. I have no clue,
Hmm.
you know?
That's a beautiful way to put it. And I think so often, we come, we see a difference, and that triggers us, right? Or we then kind of get combative, with someone in that moment, because again, we're like in this kind of imposing place where we're wanting to fit them into our version of reality or whatever. So I think that was such a beautiful way to frame up just how to offer a statement to someone that holds space for them and honors them and their journey, but also kind of gives you the space you need in it too. I think
Mhm.
that was so beautiful. So thank you for sharing that with the
Mhm.
audience.
Well, you're welcome. I mean, you got to
You-
listen to people, right? You just have to listen to them.
yeah,
Sometimes you aren't gonna like what you hear, and
yeah,
that's your problem
yeah,
more than anything else. If you don't like what you hear, then you got to figure out, okay, am I right to feel the way that I do about what this person just said to me? Because
right.
sometimes you are right, like take the egoistic thing out of it. Sometimes you are right to feel that way, and you have very good reasons why you feel that way because it goes against your values,
Mhm.
right? It's not always about programming. Sometimes it goes against your values. It's not that you're having cognitive dissonance on something. It's like you just know better. Because you've been there, you've been past it, or certain things, or like truth is a big frequency that you feel. And once something resonates at that frequency and you get good at feeling it,
Yeah,
you know what's truth and what's fiction, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so you kind of to honor yourself at that point. You say, okay, well, it's fine to have differences because guess what? This is a hard one for people to get. Differences can make two people or you and a group of people or whatever the case is, make it stronger, make
right,
things work.
right,
But people are so concerned with being right. But what I can be right, you can be right, he can be right, she can be right, we can all be right and still be in different places of awareness and still work together on certain things that we can all agree to focus on and forget the rest of the stuff.
right. And it's like each soul comes into this experience with its own unique gifts and
Mm-hmm.
talents and skills and wisdom and perspective. And we need all those differences to make up a harmonious whole. Like that is the point,
Right.
right? But it's in how we
Right.
navigate those differences together and how we
Right.
recognize the beauty in those and find a
Yeah.
way to fit the puzzle pieces together, I guess.
Right. And then unfortunately there's going to be the other layers to that where there are people where you realize, oh boy, that person's brain is dangerous. The contents of that person's brain is dangerous. I have to limit my exposure
Yeah,
to this person.
yeah,
That's just to be real because a lot of people, don't want to talk about that aspect,
yeah,
but it I don't think a lot of this stuff was meant to be cut and dry.
yeah,
And I think we expect stuff to be rigidly one way or another.
yeah. Yeah, the universe is complex in
Uh-huh.
its design. Like it's beautifully simple and complex at the same time. And
Yeah.
that's a whole nother conversation, I guess. But like we probably don't have time for that whole conversation. But there is something, yeah, about this whole life experience that we often want to fit into like a box or make really easy um or just not allow for the complexity and the differences that are there. And yeah, I think that's an interesting thing to reflect on, it, especially at this time in human civilization. You mentioned you're kind of expecting, challenges to continue and there to be, a continuing few years of things that we're going to have maybe some challenge dealing with or seeing or meeting. And um, I want to get your opinion on that because I think there's also this aspect of what's happening in the world that requires us to go through a grieving process at times. So you mentioned recognizing where certain behaviors or actions, whatever that is, whether it's a person, organization, corporation, government, whatever, recognizing when that is counter to your morals, your ethics, your truth. And I think for a lot of people who are waking up, they're recognizing there's a lot that's counter to whatever moral, integrity they feel they have. And that's a hard thing to face and recognize and deal with. And so, we've been talking about the like depth of distortion and programming that we're digging out of, and our civilization is continuing to go through massive challenges as we evolve and as we try to break through this current era of distortion. So how do we hold both of those things, and how do we look at the world around us and move forward with our positive programming and getting to what I like to call kind of like a miracle mindset, where we're really in flow with the way the universe is meant for us to engage, while also living in this reality and holding space for what's happening on this planet. That was a lot, so do
I
your best
busted
with
out laughing.
that.
Yeah. You made me laugh. I had to, because that is such a difficult concept to unpack.
It's a lot.
The main thing about it is that the more aware you become, the more complex life seems to be, because you notice all of these different layers that were in between the layers that you first saw, that you were like, wait, that's another thing I haven't seen yet. And you're like, I thought I already figured that out. And it keeps going on like that. But like I said to you, one of the things I talk about a lot in relation to this topic is that everyone is programmed. And when someone is seeing through the filter of a program, it doesn't matter what you say or what you do. You can be like this, and they can't hear you and they can't see you, and they're not going to. They have to get there on their own time, and they have to go through the discomfort and do the inner rewiring on their own to be able to understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And um and so, like I explain to people, it is a war on consciousness that we are witnessing, especially at this time more than ever before. And to get around that stuff, you really want to grow, you have to guard your consciousness, because we put so much stuff in our bodies, or we're exposed to so much stuff, toxic heavy metals and things like that. Caffeine is a big one. Sugar, all these things that affect our brains. And if our brains aren't working correctly, our thinking's not going to be working correctly, and we are in an even deeper state of hypnosis than we ordinarily would be around certain things. And so we can't really see the daylight creeping in, so to speak. It makes it difficult. And so we're constantly bombarded with stuff that is darkness to kind of close the curtains on us more and more. And we have to isolate ourselves from those things. I'm not saying go live on a mountain in Tibet or something. You could if you wanted to. I highly recommend doing that, actually. That sounds like fun.
Highly recommend moving to Tibet. Well, I did that. Jehan. I left my life in Texas and moved to Sedona, Arizona. So I was following guidance that I was receiving, but it was also, this moment of, I need to be somewhere else. I need to be somewhere just a little more isolated so I can really focus on what I need to focus on and not be caught up in the rat race
Yeah.
of city life.
Well, there's a very good reason for that. If you have a plant and it's in too small of a pot and it's become root bound, what do? You have to put it in a bigger pot, right? So if you keep planting seeds in the same space and you realize it's not growing, it's the soil, it's not the seed, right?
Right.
So not everyone can get away from where they're at. Not everyone can relocate. So what do? You look at the things in your environment, but your environment is your diet too,
Yeah.
right? So mentally, what's your diet? Physically, what's your diet? What's your nutrition? Because all these things are factors that block our spiritual self. I
Right.
tell people, turn off the damn TV, just turn it off. All right. Unless you're watching Star Family Wisdom, just turn off the damn TV.
Thank you. Yes.
Right.
Conscious programming.
Conscious awakening network or something. Just
Yeah.
turn off the
Yeah.
TV because it's putting information into your brain
Yeah.
that is essentially garbage. And then you wonder why you create garbage in your life. Because consciousness just replicates what it sees.
Yeah.
It's looking to recreate an experience, and the limbic system is a recording device. So when you watch a horror movie or a music video and they're doing whatever they're doing and you like that, your limbic system loves that, it records and remembers that. And so you begin to act that way in scenarios that are similar to that according to it, not according to your personality.
Right.
So we're being tricked because control of perception is the name of the game,
Right. Even
right?
music. Like you talk about this also. Like you're real big on media, music, and helping people discern, between conscious media and media that is just putting garbage in our heads, like you said. What
Mm.
about music specifically?
Oh man, and see, this is my area because I lived that life. I became a drug dependent narcissist because because I thought that was how I was supposed to act in order to play in a rock and roll band or whatever. I thought
Yeah.
I was supposed to be that guy, and we emulate those things that we see on the music videos and the music channels. I don't even know if they still have MTV and stuff like that. I grew up with MTV. So
Carson Daly, remember
Carson
him?
Daly, TRL,
TRL,
Headbangers Ball,
yes.
all those things. So, I mean, all of that affects you on a subconscious level. It's trying to dictate to you who you should be, and it's taking you away from your spiritual self. Your spiritual self is what informs how you operate in this world, in what is your personality, what are your values, and those kinds of things. But if you are watching something on a screen, it's turning off the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe, and that's a very bad thing because that's where your rational thinking, your critical thinking, and your spirituality
Yeah.
comes from,
Yeah.
right? And, and that's done on purpose. I can't even sugarcoat that. That's done on purpose. Like they know what they're doing with that stuff, right?
Yeah, every
And they
corporation has a marketing team. All of the marketing teams, for the most part, have a good understanding of how the mind works and how to position things and how to
right.
program, right? And in this day and age too, I should also just comment, people just get raised in that system. Like they don't even know that that is wrong. Like they're just doing that because that's their job.
Right.
And it actually is just this full scale mind control game that has been
Exactly.
monetized.
Exactly. And they do stuff. Just to comment on that before I get back on about the music, they have these teams of scientists that will set up warehouses in the middle of the night to put products on fake shelves, and they'll invite people to come to do these studies to hook you up to brain scans and monitor your facial responses and all these things. They've got that down to a science to try to sell you stuff or to know whether the next episode of The Bachelor is going to have a particular impact on you, things like that. So don't ever think for a second, to anybody that's listening, don't ever think for a second that any of this stuff is innocent. There's a lot of people, like you said, they're involved and they just don't know it. That's not at their pay grade. That's not what they do. They don't know that stuff
Totally.
is going on behind the scenes. They just get a bunch of paperwork that says this is what we're doing. And they're like, okay, well, boss says this, we do that.
Totally. Well, and
Right.
I should, one more little sidebar before we get back to the music. Before I was awake, I was in the corporate world, for a long time and in retail and there's just these aspects of retail and merchandising that are commonplace, right? The marketing, processes and strategies it's just commonplace across all of business. And for the longest time, didn't even think twice about it, right? Because I was in this like sleepwalking place, this unconscious place that's just what we do. That's just the way the world works. And then as you start to wake up a little more to it, you do start to realize, no, there really is this like, and again, a lot of it's unconscious, so I'm not calling out, every single person in the corporate world for this, because a lot of people are just going along with what they've been taught, how the system has been developed. But yeah, it's just awful. Like if you got to the point of, like judging a civilization based off of its spiritual integrity, we would be failing miserably, right? Because we're just walking around manipulating each other constantly in this world. And
Earth school.
yeah, and it's like, and even in the, the online business world, I just want to comment on this for a second. There's also this aspect of online marketing and business that requires some of the same tactics. And, as I've been developing Star Family Wisdom, it's like, yeah, you want to build an email list, you want to send out some emails, you want to connect with people, but at the same time, as I started learning from all of these other, businesses and watching and, studying what's going on out there, I just started to develop this huge resistance to copying what they're doing, because it's essentially the same thing that's going on out there in brick and mortar retail. We've just translated it to the online world, and we're just trying to manipulate people's, response time and neural networks and triggers to get them to buy stuff, right? It's like utilizing this like scarcity mindset and the lack mindset and feeding off of people's, worthiness issues and stuff. And the amount of anyone listening who's running a spiritual business, this might be for you. If, the amount of spiritual businesses out there that are operating with those sorts of tactics, and, it's not to say you can't run a sale or offer something at a discount every once in a while, that's okay. But like, there's a level of that starts to get into really playing off of people's issues and playing off of the mind control that is possible. And so, I just challenge everyone out there who's at any sort of business, to really think twice about that and, think about how we can do things differently going forward. Because like, that's not the answer either. It's like, we want to help people, but, the amount of stuff that we get bombarded with that's just trying to trigger us to get us to buy something is not okay.
Yeah, it is mind control at its finest. And I know you know this. You don't have to be sleazy. You don't have to try to sell anything to anyone. The right people always show up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said to you before, the darkness imposes itself on people. The darkness kind of pushes itself on you all the time, 24/7. But the light's just waiting for you to ask for help. And
Right.
anyone that wants to come to you for help for any of your services, it's not because it's not because they're having the time of their life. They're
Right.
at they're at rock bottom. They're like, please take my money, like I'll
Right.
do anything you say.
Right.
So you got to keep that in mind as a marketer and realize that you really don't have to market yourself so
Yeah.
hard. You don't have to push yourself on anybody, because it's kind of like intellectual rape, actually,
Yeah.
in a lot of ways.
It's like we need to start asking those questions, even in, meeting rooms, in corporate America. Like, is this actually, in integrity? If we're wanting to be good humans, to each other and not just, make money at, the expense of people.
If they want the strawberries, they'll buy the strawberries, Karen.
Exactly. Just give them good strawberries. That was our goal
Exactly.
at Whole Foods. I should say, Whole Foods of all companies, there's a reason I stayed there a long time. Whole Foods for the most part, really is a conscious business. It is possible to do business in a more conscious way out there. So,
Right.
okay, back to the music.
Right. So
So,
music is actually in itself is actually influencing us at a cellular level all the time. And so what that means is that anytime we're actually exposed to music, it's affecting us. It's speeding up or slowing down the heart rate. It's relaxing the nervous system or agitating it. It's affecting your blood pressure. It's affecting your digestion. It's affecting how you breathe. So, um, everybody knows that music affects the way that you think about yourself. And music is one of the main driving forces behind influencing culture besides the TV. So what happens is that, well, I should say not what happens, but what has happened to us is that we have become extremely complacent and complicit to our own slavery through music. And what we don't realize is that we had the ancient civilizations that were very careful about what they did with music, and they knew that sound was used to degrade the mind or to enhance spiritual development. So you had people like Pythagoras who basically said that music is just a derivative of numbers and mathematics. And he said that the way he saw things was that the whole universe was kind of linked to the same numbers and mathematical ratios that were found in the musical scales and stuff like that. And he just kind of knew that music influenced your thoughts. It could create certain emotions and it could control your bodily health, right? So Geraldine showed me this last night actually with Kanye talking about the 808, saying how his exact words were it f's up your frequencies, it screws up your chakras, and he's right. Right, because we have that human hearing spectrum, which is 20 hertz to 20,000 kilohertz. And usually when you're mixing music, you want to cut those things out because the heartbeat is around 55-60 hertz, and that's what the kick drum is at, and it's called the heartbeat of the music for a reason. Anything below that is the sub frequency, so that's where the 808s are at. So they try to minimize the amount of sub frequencies because it would blow out your speakers and make everything sound terrible in the first place. But it's also just really not good for the hearing spectrum, and it's not good for your energetic body, right? So they try to control those frequencies and tame them. They may have to add some back in and stuff like that in the final process of a record, but it's done tastefully in a particular way that it's not overwhelming. But with the 808s and stuff like that, it's just all on all the time, like boom, 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 all the time. And it's a representation of the message of the music. It's lower frequency beings that are coming in. And what direction should I go with this? Okay, so when the subconscious mind, when we're analyzing our programming and we're out there in the field, let's say in meditation or something, we have access to these fragmented aspects of ourselves. And these entities and these beings and stuff like that represent fragmented aspects of ourselves. So it's not necessarily that it's all separate energy from us. We have that in the field and we have to be able to take that out. So this music kind of calls that energy into your life. It degrades your energetic body, that makes it more susceptible for you to act out the darkest aspects of yourself and to become that darkness, invite these entities towards you rather than cast them out of you, right?
So which
So
music is this? Like, so you're saying the 808s, like what does that apply to?
so the 808s would be anything that's very low frequency, below like 100 hertz or anything like that. You're
Okay.
dealing with lower frequencies along that spectrum, because that's like 100 hertz and below is where the bass is mainly at, right?
Okay.
So it's just so low that it's very agitating on a cellular level. Imagine well, you know this, you don't even have to imagine it. The higher frequency is very light,
Right.
right? So like the treble stuff is much lighter in frequency
Okay.
than
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
lower frequency, right? So that's the easiest way to explain it. And so what the ancient civilizations understood was that music was kind of like an energetic formula that they used. It was free energy,
Right.
right? It was like a
Right.
0 point machine to them,
Right.
actually. And what they were saying is that they knew that music had the power to violate free will. right? That's interesting, right? Because only darkness does that.
Yeah,
Only darkness is
hold on a second. So yeah, so are there people like purposefully putting out music to try to steer people away from free will?
100%.
Okay. What kind of music is
100%.
that? Like if we were just like, flipping through our iPhone and, what's on the list, what sort of songs might come on that would tip us off that that's a song we shouldn't listen to?
Well, take the 808s out of the equation. The entire music industry was made just for that purpose, to direct culture, unfortunately.
So
So
all
the
of it,
best,
basically.
so the best music to listen to would be stringed instruments, like shamanic drumming. I know you're gonna love that.
Yeah.
Um, classical music, things like that, because they found when they hook people up to brain scans that those are the things that are less threatening to the energetic body, and they actually put you in a better frequency that you can tap into your spiritual self, right?
Right.
And one thing I have to say about that is everybody needs to read a book called the Tavistock Institute of Mind Control. And Tavistock is basically a think tank where they come up with all the ideas that dictate culture, music, what are the beliefs that are gonna be in society, how we dress, how we talk, all those things. So when you talk about ideas, that well, ghostwriting in music is a big deal. There's a whole industry underlying that where 6 or 7 other people write the song and you think it's the artist that wrote it,
Right.
but
Right.
it really wasn't. It
Right.
wasn't Beyonce that wrote that song. It was 7 people you don't even know exist,
Right.
right? And it's coming down the pipeline saying you got to write about this is what we want them to believe, this is how we want them to talk, this is how we want them to act, this is all kinds of things. I'm not going to go so far into it. So
Wow. Okay. So this is a book we have to read. I've not
yeah, by
looked at.
Dr. John Coleman,
Okay.
Tavistock Institute. Yeah.
Okay.
um
Well, even when you
but
just listen to the lyrics in a lot of music, I haven't gone that deep in my research, so I wasn't aware of that. Oh my goodness. But even just starting to kind of question, like we were talking about earlier, just questioning, like, what am I hearing? Why am I hearing that? So many of the lyrics are violent, either like kind of a victim mentality, or it's about loss, or, it's just playing off of all of the more negative
right,
aspects of the human drama. Yeah.
the same themes in music are the same themes in television,
Yeah.
just packaged differently, you
Yeah.
know and that's the major point here, is that the ancient civilizations, whether it's ancient China or Egypt or whoever, they knew that music should never be used for entertainment,
Hmm.
because they knew that it doesn't take much to stimulate the dark side of a human being,
Right.
right?
And
And
that's why they focused on the harmonic ratios, and that's why, like, we see now, a resurgence, I guess, of some of that sort of music, or sound healing, even like using sound bowls
exactly,
to expose people to those frequencies.
exactly, that's exactly it. You get it, because they knew that using the music as entertainment would lead to immorality and incorrect behavior. They knew that people would begin to change the best aspects of what it is to be a human just by listening to music. And when you listen to older music from like the 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, you say, "Oh, that's not that harmless." But then you realize around that time, that's when the music industry came to into play, and they really started trying to ramp things up. And it's kind of like how extraterrestrials give humans little bits of information, and so we reverse engineer that and we create all these different things, and we kind of act like we did it, we didn't really do it. It's kind of like the same thing with music, where darker levels of consciousness, darker entities and stuff come through.
Mm.
And I don't want to look at this through the religious route and say demonic or satanic or use those words. I just prefer to say entity related things.
Mhm.
Darker frequencies come through, and something that was used for good was perverted, and now it's used for perception management and to make people ill. Like, is it, let me see. It's a guy called Dr. Adam Caniste. I always kind of want to call him Knuckles or something. I don't know why, but he's actually a musicologist. That's
Okay.
what he is. And he studied the side effects of music on people, different types of music, I should say. And he said that music is a really powerful drug. Music can poison you, or it can lift your spirits, and it can make you sick without knowing why. Right. And so that's pretty scary.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty scary because we had it's Lenin, who was the founder of communism. He said that one quick way to destroy a society was through its music. And you
Mm.
can actually see, there's a quote, there's a book called The Marxist Minstrels. I posted it to my Instagram. It's a handbook on communist subversion of music. And it tells you exactly how these people think. And we're actually very much living in a society that is run by that type of thinking
Mm.
to stop you from being your true spiritual self, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I think
and
there's this level of distortion that has messed with our blueprints. I like to talk about the fact that, really we do have a divine blueprint, some sort of perfect, energetic blueprint that we can connect with, that is supposed to be there in place. But as we're exposed to this world and all of the levels of programming that happen, that blueprint starts to get distorted. And like when you're talking about the musical, frequencies and vibrations, it's like I'm just seeing that, like just ripping apart the blueprint. And what we're here to do, I think, as a spiritual community, as star seeds, as people who are awakening, is restore the blueprint. Like we're here to put the blueprint back together and align with the highest level of that blueprint that we can align with, like bring that down to the physical. And it's like that requires us not listening to all of this stuff anymore.
yeah, and people ask me all the time, well, what can I do? It's like, go out and buy a guitar. They're only 99 bucks these days, or
Yeah,
you can find somebody selling one on eBay for less than that.
yeah,
Go
yeah,
buy a singing bowl, go buy
yeah,
a piano. They're all cheap these days.
yeah. And there's lots
One
of
good
good
thing,
yoga music, and chanting music you can find, on the different
exactly.
apps these days. Like there is a lot of option out there. It's just not what we got taught about.
Exactly. And I actually know a company right now that they're working on high vibration music, and it's based on the scale of the Hawkins scale, the
Oh,
level of
cool.
consciousness.
Very
It's
cool.
focused life force energy. I'm not getting paid to say this or anything. FLFE.net. You can go try it out. They have a service you can put it on your phone for 15 days free, and
Cool.
it'll mitigate all the harsh EMF frequencies, and it will blast you with um frequencies over a 500 level of consciousness, which on the scale is love, right? And
Amazing.
you
That's
can
amazing.
I use it on my house,
That's amazing.
you
I
know?
love that. Like every human
Yeah,
needs that.
exactly. So and so there's plenty of sources out there that are doing similar things, that
Yeah.
they're working on these technologies. And it's important because there's research that shows that enough volume, say you go to a concert or something, that can actually congeal the proteins in an egg,
Oh, goodness
right?
gracious. I did
Yeah,
not know that.
yeah.
Wow.
And there have been heavy metal musicians and stuff that have died from standing too close to their um speakers on stage and stuff during concerts.
Oh my
Like,
God.
it just made their heart skip a beat because the bass frequency, remember I told you, is 60 hertz in the heart. So something low like that's coming in, it goes boom, boom in the center of your chest,
Wow.
mess you up.
Wow.
So, and there's tons of research as well that tells you that plants will grow in the presence of classical music,
Yeah.
but they'll die if you play like a Miley Cyrus song or something. So It's not just heavy metal music. It's pretty much anything that isn't
Yeah.
classical music, It's very
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah.
We just
There was that Japanese scientist, going to forget his name again, but he did.
Masaru Emoto.
Thank you. He did that study on water, and he shows photographs of the water molecules when they're exposed to heavy metal music, and just the like level of destruction that has happened with those water molecules. It should be enough to get us to not want to listen to any of that music for sure.
Absolutely. And we have Spotify and all these things that we can get tons of classical music, ancient civilizations and things like that. We can find their
Yeah.
music. There's people who have found these things and they're reproducing these pieces of music. And the
Yeah.
way that they did stuff was they were very intentional about the way that they played the notes. It had to resonate in a particular way.
Yeah.
Their musicians weren't allowed to touch the instrument. They weren't allowed to be a part of the orchestra unless they'd mastered their spiritual self,
Yeah. Oh, I
right?
love that. I love that. Hmm.
Yeah.
I love that.
So yeah.
There's a book I was reading recently called The Dimensions of Paradise, which speaks, to this partially. It's about really understanding the sacred geometry and the mathematical, like harmony that needs to be present in a civilization and, any space to allow for that just natural
Oh,
paradise to unfold, to
I'm
allow
gonna write that down. What was that? Dimensions of Paradise?
dimensions of paradise.
Where'd my pen go?
It doesn't get specifically into the music side of things as much, but it speaks to the sacred geometry and harmonic ratios that need to be in place, and even like how a city could be planned, or how the ancients, planned their townships and cities and all of that to create harmony. So we know now there's harmony and there's disharmony. Like we can
Dissonance.
start
Yeah.
yeah, we can start to like put some rigor behind how we're structuring our environment, the music we're listening to, what we're watching, all of these things to allow the body, the mind, the soul to come back into its harmonic state, a truly balanced, uplifted state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. We gotta guard our consciousness because what we put in is what we get out. It's
Yeah.
hard for people to hear, but I wouldn't tell anybody to do anything that I'm not doing in my own life, and it
Yeah.
helped me tremendously.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
haven't
Same.
watched a TV set in over 7 years, and it
Wow. Wow.
just I couldn't care less about
Wow,
what's
good
on it.
for you. You're doing
Yeah.
better than I am. I still watch a little bit here and there, not TV, like, conscious awakening network stuff,
Right.
that sort of thing. But yeah, it's like there has to be new protocol in place. And for any star seeds who are listening to this, who have found this, like this is your mission to protect your consciousness, to evolve it, from where it's been, from, where we got programmed in this life. And Jehan is an absolute excellent resource for you in that, as we're doing this work to get back to who we truly are. And I like to call that place the new human. Where it's really the ancient human, but we're bringing that back, and we're doing the work to transform, to become that new human. And that's why we're on the planet right now. It feels
Yeah.
hard, it is big, it's a lot to take on, but it's what we're here to do. And I want to talk all about your other exploration, which is, past life memories you've had, and your connection with star family. I even want to go back and talk about those beings that showed up, when you were in the darkness. And I think we're going to have to save that for the next episode, because we still have so much to talk about. But I think there's probably going to be some really amazing nuggets and words of wisdom in that conversation, as it relates to our star family and how we're being guided and who we really are. So, Jehan, we'll have to do another conversation really soon.
Fine by me. I like hanging out with you.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
How can people find you and work with you?
So if you want to talk to me directly, you can send me an email at selfsabotageinfo@proton.me. And you can follow me on Instagram at Jehan Sattaur. That's JehanSattaur.
Awesome. And we've got your links in the show notes below so everyone can grab those as well. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and engaging in this conversation. This is like deep stuff. This is important stuff to unpack and integrate into our lives and into how we're operating. So I just so appreciate you for being here, and Jehan for sharing yourself and your wisdom and your journey with the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna.
And everyone, tune in again soon for part 2, where we'll talk about our star family connections and some of Jehan's other exploration and experiences that have happened. And we'll talk about how we really get to know our true selves. And that's a fun process when we start to have those sorts of experiences. So we'll come back with another conversation. Comment below or leave a review. Let us know what you thought about this chat, and we'll see you next time in the next episode. Bye for now.